Welcome back. We're continuing our conversation on what to do in the midst of chaos. And this week I want to talk about the sovereignty of God, thinking about chaos. And as Christians, we're called to do things differently than the unbelieving world. In fact, in the midst of chaos, the unbelieving world is going to react, and their reactions sometimes can be even irrational. But if we're honest, as believers, sometimes we do the very same thing. But we are called to handling chaos differently than the world. And I think that's where the sovereignty of God steps in, when it's outside of our control and it's inside of God's control. And so, what can you do in the midst of chaos? Well, my answer for that question today would be surrender your control to God. Let me explain to you what I mean by that from what Daniel chapter 4 says. Just before I read verse 35, I'll remind you that this is a moment in which Nebuchadnezzar, earlier in the chapter, he's got it all. He's proud of everything he has established and accomplished and done. And he receives a dream from God where God is kind of making it clear, I will humble the proud. And so he gets this dream that says, I'm going to make you like an animal. You're going to think like an animal. You're going to be eating the grass in the ground. And you will be like this until you look up to heaven and recognize I am God over everything. And so this happens. And Nebuchadnezzar is like this for several years. And then finally he looks up to heaven and he is restored. He is humbled by God and he recognizes that in humility. And he says this in verse 35. All the inhabitants of the earth are counted as nothing, and he does what he wants with the army of heaven and the inhabitants of the earth. There is no one who can block his hand or say to him, what have you done? So what he's saying right here is just that. God's over everything. If the God of the universe, who has created every intricate detail in your life, down to your very existence, has a say in it, if he has control over it, who are we to question him and question his will and his plan? And in the midst of our chaos, one of the hardest things to do is to surrender what little control we have. Maybe we think we're in more control than we really are. But we have to be able to surrender to the sovereignty of God, the reality that he's in control of it all. God, you've created me. You've created my existence. And my circumstances right now are out of my hands, but they're in yours. And so this week I encourage you and I challenge you to remember that. In the midst of chaos, surrender your control to God because he's got it. He's the one that we are to seek when things are in chaos. He's the one that we are to ask for help from because he's the one who's in control of it all. And if this has encouraged or blessed you in any way, shape, or form, I would encourage you to go and tell somebody else about this as well. And may God bless you this week.